quickly check that I am actually live because I need to know and I need to be able to watch the comments as I'm doing this. So let me see what's going on my channel here. Am I live is the question. It seems that I'm live. I'm gonna push my sound down. I'm gonna be watching it on my phone so that I can see the chat. Can't see myself live. Yeah, I seem to be all right. So I'm watching the chat as well, which is great. So the inspiration for this, let me see if I can hear myself actually talking. Dun dun. So the inspiration for I can hear myself talking. It's a bit behind, but that means my mic works. So back to what I'm going to show you today. So this was inspired from another YouTuber's channel that I constantly am on. It's so his name is Imran Sadiq. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. He is also known as Web Squadron. They do, other than the fact that he runs an agency, he does help people, businesses, and stuff learn Elementor, WordPress, and business ideas. I'll try to set up an overlay to his channel after I'm done doing the live because I'm not a pro YouTuber, so I don't have all this pre-set up. So anyway, in one of the latest live chat that we had, one of his viewers asked the question, "Can you store entries from plugins, form plugins?" And he specifically said WP Forms, which we took to mean that is the WP Forms plugin that he was talking about. But this can also be done with other plugins like Contact Form 7. Well, actually, I'm not 100% sure about Contact Form 7, but I've done it before with Forminator. So I've decided to make this video just to show that person, and hopefully if I see him on one of the live chats, I'll forward the video to him, or if he comes across my channel somehow. I think he's actually subscribed recently, if it's the right person that I'm thinking about, but honestly I don't remember. But anyway, the point of this video is to show you that it is possible, usually with form plugins that have a developer API, to do anything with the form values, assuming you have something called an action to do something after the submission process is complete. Now, I'm going to show you how I've set this up, just as a, and by the way, this code is by no means like super secure or super correct. I just did it as a proof of concept to show that you can do it. My intention isn't to teach you PHP or how to securely write an API or how to securely connect to a database and whatnot. The screen that you're looking at is my SiteGround hosting. I've created a temporary domain, as SiteGround calls them. They allow us to do that if you have the right kind of account. This will serve as my external non-WordPress server, where I'm trying to send the database, the data that I'm submitting through WordPress to. So just so you understand what's going on here is I have a database that I created on this external, supposedly external SiteGround server. I have created a table that I named subs for some stupid reason. And the only thing it stores is an email address and a full name. As you can see, the one full name is empty. And the reason is because I had the wrong variable set in the code when I first wrote it. Now the second one's correct, which means my code works. But let's start from what I've got on the remote server where I'm trying to save the data. I'll be adding this code somewhere, either as a blog post on my website or maybe even a link to a Git. But because the code isn't really secure, I don't want to share it to GitHub because people are judgmental. And my point wasn't to write secure code or anything here. It's because it's also Sunday and I'm lazy. I'm not going to do secure code. If you need to learn how to write PHP, I need to teach you, and you need to sort of uh, take loads and loads of lessons. But let's start. So I've got local by Flywheel running in because I wanted to honor the reason I'm making this video. I called the local website Web Squadron API.local. Again, it's not actually an API, but you should write an API if you're doing something like this. So the idea is that Web Squadron API is my WordPress website, which is on some server somewhere. In this case, it's at my house, and it's a local server. And I'm trying to submit a form from this website, which I'll show you in a second here. So let me go. So this is my homepage. I didn't really do anything. I just put the form here as a point of reference, and the form only has the fields that I require, which are in this case um, just a full name field and an email field. I can show you how I set these up here. So here's the form builder uh, for WP Forms. And I'll show you that it has a full name, an email field, and a submit button. Uh, these should be required so that you don't have empty values and so forth. And on the field, you can see IDs. By the way, the same concept applies to Forminator or anything else you want to use. I love Forminator because the API is so robust. Not that I know WP Forms API as well as I do Forminator, but I think that they basically have like identical functionality. But I could be wrong about that because I didn't analyze the whole API to check. So anyway, we've got full name and email. The IDs are very important. I'll explain why in a second. So full name is 1 and email, as you can see, is 2. So this is our form, right? Now, if you have the professional version of this plugin, you can store database entries to your current WordPress install. Let's make the assumption, though, that we don't want to do that. We want to store them somewhere externally. The external server we want to store them to is not Web Squadron API.local, but it is actually this random server that I have here, which is named Georgiosen, which is my Greek name, Yorgos, which is George, 39, which is my server, some random number, and this is what SiteGround gives us for my for like uh, temporary domains. Because I'm gonna delete this as soon as the video goes down. So as you can see here, right, I wrote a script that's called save data.php, and then I did a parameter, and the reason I did this was to test if um, my code works. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. On SiteGround, I have a million things open, and I'll explain why. So this is the file. There's nothing else on the server. It's just this file. What it does, it takes the server name, the username, the password, and the database, which I don't care to show you because I'm going to delete it as soon as I'm done with the video, right? And I'm going to And then what I do after that is, this is really dirty. I didn't actually take care of the code or make sure that the guy is authenticated before he reaches this page or anything. So let's leave it at that. What I'm doing is I'm setting a variable to get full name. I'll show you why I did get full name in a second, and get email so that I get the 2 parameters that I need. I then do an SQL Server connection. I check that the connection is valid, and then I write the SQL statement that's required to insert the values, which you should know if you're trying to do this anyway. Insert into subs, which is my table name, ID, which should be empty because the ID is auto increment, and that's so you don't have unique, non-unique values in the table. So full name and email. If that connection is correct, it's going to supposedly say a new record has been created, which we don't care about because in WordPress you won't be able to see that anyway. Otherwise, it's going to give us an error. In WordPress, again, you won't see anything. It will just not do anything. That makes sense. And I close the connection. That's all this does. Now, let's go to the WordPress part. So let's start from what I've done. As you saw, I only installed WP Forms. I have the pro version. I'm not sure that it will work with the free version. I haven't tested that. You can if you want, but for sure, usually these plugins, right? They don't give you access to the API unless you have the pro version, but you're free to try the code without. Worst case scenario, the code crashes and it doesn't work, which means you need pro. So let's sort of dissect this code here, right? So this is a function name that I gave the function, and it just says WPF, which is WP forms underscore George underscore process underscore complete. And I'll show you why I chose process complete as my sort of name. It's because in actuality, the action that we will be running later is actually called WP forms process completed, so that I don't forget the action. So when you write a function, so look at it like this. This is my function. This whole thing here. I'll explain what this is in a second and what it does. But in WordPress, this is how you call an action. So because of the fact that, let me just Google this so you can see what I'm talking about here. Ooh, Carapace is on, and so is Imran, which is fantastic because I'm doing this for one of his viewers. Fantastic. Nice to see you guys. I'm looking at the comments on my phone, so if my head twists, that's why. Because yeah, not a professional YouTuber. So let me just Google the. Oh, it's not what I wanted to do. Let me just Google the little function that I was looking at, and I keep forgetting which windows I'm at. So I'm stealing this. I already know this function exists. I just want to show you where you can Google for the rest of the API for this plugin. Okay, so you just Google that, and it should somehow take you to the actions, which is the developer API. You can see. As I said, I'm unsure if you need Pro for this or not. I do have Pro for this, but you may not need it at all to access the API. For Forminator, I don't even think you need the Pro version to access the API. Again, I might be wrong, but anyway, it basically is, it shows you that this happens only when the submission is successful. And what I am doing is I'm telling it to when the submission is actually valid and complete, so that all the you know um, the validation is done by WP Forms or Forminator, depending on what you're using. In this case, WP Forms, and then it should do what I want it to do. Now let's explain what I'm trying to do here. So if you know PHP at all, this apps int function is means just give me an integer, don't give me negative numbers and anything. And then it says make sure that this form ID or the form data that I'm trying to access is form ID number 5. Where did I find this? Obviously, I know the ID of the form based on where I built it. So let me just get out of this and show you where that is. I should be able to, no, I don't want to go back. I should be able to go to the forms on my local machine here. Just bear with me. Just so you know where I found the form ID initially. Um, so when I did WP Forms, it gave me a form ID, which happened to be 5. So you can see it here, it says form ID 5, which is what I'm using in my code. So let's get back to the code here. So I'm saying, okay, if you can check the form data that I'm requesting and make sure that it refers to this form ID, um, then let it happen. And if it's not, then just die, which is why I've got return here. Now, there's The next thing we want is we want to, because it already knows that I'm doing a form submission, I can say, get me the entries using this function here, and based on the current entry ID, because I'm currently processing a specific entry, right? So it knows now that it's got all the data from that form, including the form ID, the form fields, and the information that I've put in the form fields before I click the submit button, right? So the JSON decode function, you don't really need unless you're writing an actual API, but because of the way Forminator stores data into WordPress, you need to decode the entry fields. And when they're decoded, you can get them in PHP format, which we need. So I know that I'm storing a full name and an email, which I conveniently named the variables the same. And then I'm saying, okay, go grab me the field with ID 1, but I don't want the actual field because the field has more things in it, like what color is the field, the name of it, and all that. I don't need that. I just need the value that I inserted, which is why I'm using the value parameter. This is a multi-dimensional array, right? So I've grabbed the fields that I need, the values of the fields that I'm inserting. The convert back to JSON, you don't really need. And in our case, we I am with this function here, I'm currently saving the fields into WP forms. I could have just deleted this function, um, because my intention is to actually save it into my external database, right? But for now, just leave it there. It doesn't affect anything. But that's why I said this code isn't cleaned or refined to a specific purpose. I'm just showing you that it can be done in a sense, yeah? So I'm just leaving it alone. So now, the next thing, okay, so this is where my magic starts, right? The magic that's required for what we actually want to do. Now, again, this code is not secure, it's not clean. You can do this many different ways, but let's do it like the worst possible way, I guess. You can do this. So I'm checking if full name and email have values, because otherwise, what's the point, right? And if they don't, I log the error and I kill the process. If they do, that's fantastic. I just create this array which contains the values. You don't really need this unless you're writing an API. I left it here because I'm assuming that the person that wants to use this code is eventually going to write an API, so they need like how do I say this? Associative array to use in their API, right? So anyway, the most important part here is the URL. This URL is the URL to our remote server. Again, not very secure because you shouldn't have like ways for people to know where you're sending data. So you could hide this in a functional plugin, or you can do it externally somehow so that it's not inside the function, or you can obfuscate the code so that people don't know what that is. But anyway, I'm directly giving it the name to my external server, to the PHP file that I mentioned, and then I am posting, as we coders say, the full name. I'm grabbing the value from the data that I stored above, and also the email. The arguments array is again only for API usage. I could have just left it alone since I haven't actually written an API, but the reason I left it here again is because I'm assuming the person's going to actually write an API in the end. So this is where the magic happens. There is a function in WordPress called WP Remote Post. And using the URL and the arguments array that I've provided above, you can send it information, and it does error checking and stuff to make sure that it gets a response or it doesn't. Do not use the console log function. This is a custom function that I wrote that you don't have. I'll show you where that is in a second. And I also commented it out because honestly my code works, so I don't need it. But I'll show you a little snippet of what that is in a second. So I'm gonna remind you what the add action thing does. The add action thing calls the actual function that exists within WP Forms, which is called WP Forms underscore process underscore complete. And it says attach my function to it, which is this code. The number 10 is the priority. So how quickly this is going to happen. The lower the number is, the faster this will happen. So the more priority this function has. The number 4 refers to the number of parameters that are in my function. If you know anything about programming, the number 4 comes from this. And I didn't decide these randomly. These were given to us by the actual definition of the function for completing the process for WP Forms. So we knew we needed 4 parameters, and we named them exactly the same as what the function tells us to name them so that we could use the functionality. Either way, this does what it's supposed to do. And this is, I used code snippet because I was too lazy to do a child theme, and you really don't have to, even for stuff like this. Um, and I was testing, and I'm human, so I make mistakes when I write code. And this code snippet thing uh, doesn't crash the website when I make mistake. It just says there's an error, go fix it, and I come back and I fix it. So anyway, the code is currently functional. So what it will do now is let's go test it out. I'll probably have this code somewhere, but again, don't use it on production because it's dirty and it's not secured. So yeah. So let's just say, um, whose name should I use? Let's do John Smith because we're random people, right? Smith, and I'm just gonna use a random email here. So I'm just gonna say test at random.com. We don't care what it is. I'm gonna show you the current state of my database before I do the submission. So the current state of the database, unless I did something stupid before, let's do this again. Check the state. Only 2 records. FYI, you might wonder why I have so many tabs open of site tools. Let me explain why. Because SiteGround is built to host websites, it's not really a development type of environment for for people like me. So sometimes, yeah, you have to clear the cache because SiteGround does store database queries in the database, and I'm not gonna fiddle with excluding my code from cache and stuff like that. So I have it open. I just did a clear cache for, for sanity's sake, and I'm now gonna go submit our little form here. Remember, John Smith isn't in the database yet. I click submit, and if everything goes to plan, it should go green and say your submission has been saved. Remember, it's sending from my local machine, web squadron API.local, to my SiteGround server. That's why it might take a while. And presumably, if I haven't changed any code, it shouldn't crash either. There you go. It's done. Let's go to our database and see that this is actually stored. Um, let's see. Did it store Mr. John Smith? Did I get any empty values? Yep. He got his ID. Now you might be wondering, why is the ID 10? Well, I've tried it a million times, and the ID keeps incrementing. It doesn't go back to 0 just because I deleted records. But if you know databases at all, that is how things work. I will put the code on my website, maybe, or a GitHub, depending on what I decide to do. I will link Web Squadron to the video if he doesn't mind, because the inspiration is from the Kickass live chats you guys can watch whenever he's live at, like, I guess, noon sometimes, British time. I'm in Cyprus, so it's 2 o'clock p.m. for me sometimes when we're on the live. So feel free to come join us. We just talk WordPress. We usually talk Elementor. There are I'm not so much an Elementor user, but I dabble. I'm more of a Divi person, but I help clients that have Elementor anyway and that I inherit. So I help the group out with crazy stuff like uh, advice on possibilities with WordPress that may or may not involve code. In this case, as you can tell, it involves code. So I decided to do this little video. I was going to go on earlier, but people kept disturbing me, so I couldn't really write the code that was required. It's not that hard to understand what the code is doing as long as you know that your form plugin has an API for you. So for Forminator, which I use way more, there is a API, Forminator Dev API, which has a nice explanation of what you can do with it, and it's all available and listed, and it gives you all the methods, but it's basically the same idea, right? So I could have went to say, okay, let's use Forminator. Get form, I would have to give an ID just like I did for WP forms, and then I could go get the fields from above, which is a get fields, I think. Is it get get entry? I keep thinking it's get entry. If I remember correctly, it's get entries or get entry. Get and get underscore entry. But my point is get form, update, get polls. Oh yeah, Forminator has polls too if you're or quizzes and stuff, and they have different formats, obviously. So I can get form fields specifically. What I'm trying to say is there are methods so I can say get entry with a specific ID, which could be the current ID, and it's the same idea that I have a form ID and I have an entry ID, and I can call that like I did for WP Forms. But what I'm saying is when your form plugin has the actual um, the actual capacity, as in a dev API that you can utilize to manipulate data on specific occasions, like when the form is submitted, or in the case where the form has an error, do something that you need to log, I guess. You're welcome to do that so long as your form plugin provides it. I'm not going to stay on long, guys, but if you guys think that this helped, let me know if you need like more crazy things like this. Hopefully around WordPress, because generally I code, but I prefer to code in WordPress, and it is what I do nowadays. So feel free to leave me a comment, like, subscribe if you aren't already. And if you find this useful and you want me to do something more solid and not this dirty, you're welcome to request a video, and you never know, I might just do it. Hope you guys have a great Sunday, and we'll talk soon, I guess. Talk to you guys soon. Bye bye. Kill the stream here.